Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Praptasya Kalyana Gunana Vasya Vande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam Praptasya Kalyana Gunana Vasya Vande Gurashi Vande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam Vande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam Mahaprabhu ki Tana Nitya Gita Vaditra Madhya Manasura Sena Romanchakam Pasru Taranga Bhajo Vande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam Vande Gurashi Charanara Shri Vigrahara Dana Nityanana Shingaratanama Diramarjanadu Shri Vigrahara Dana Nityanana Shingaratanama Diramarjanadu Juktasya Bhaktamsya Niyunjatapi Vande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam Chaturvidhashi Bhagavat Prasada Satana Triptan Hari Bhakta Shanga Chaturvidhashi Bhagavat Prasada Satana Triptan Kridvaiva Tripte Bhajato Shadeva Vande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam Bhajata Shadeva Vande Gurashi Charanara Shiradhikama Bhavayarapara Madhura Leela Gunarupanamna Shri Radhika Madhavayara Madhura Leela Gunarupanamna Pratikshana Swadhanalalupasya Vande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam Dhanalopasya Vande Gurashi Charanara Ne Kunjayono Ratikeli Siddhai Jayali Bhiri Yuktir Apekshaneya Ne Kunjayono Ratikeli Siddhai Jayali Bhiri Yuktir Tatratidaksha Atibalabhasya Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Tatratidaksha Atibalabhasya Vande Gurashi Sakshadharitena Shamasta Shastri Ruktastatha Bhataiva Sadhve Ruktastatha Kintu Prabhorja Priya eva tasya Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Yasya prasada Bhagavat prasado Yasya prasadan Nagati kutapi Yasya prasada Bhagavat prasado Yasya prasada Nagati kutapi Jayam stuvam tasya Yasatrin sandhyam Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Yasatrin sandhyam Vande Gurashi Jayam stuvam tasya Yasatrin sandhyam Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Jayam stuvam tasya Yasatrin Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Nama Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivrishesha Shunavadi Pachata Deshatarine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Bol. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hari Yadaye Namah, Krishna Jadavaye Namah, Jadavaye Madhavaye Kesavaye Namah, Agopal Govinda Ram Shri Madhusudan, Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohan, Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Sita, Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita, Shri Rupa Sanatan Vataraguna, Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasaraguna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Shri Radha Nila Madhav, Radha Nila Madhav Radhe, Radha Nila Madhav Radhe. Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Subhadrama, Jaya Sudarshan Chakra. Baladev, Jaya Subhadrama, Jaya Sitaram, 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 Jaya Lakshman Hanuman. Nitai Gora Haribo, 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 Nitai Gora Haribo, 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 Nitai Gora Pramanande, Haribo. Jai Vishwaparamita Prabhajaka Sutra Iskon Pratishta Beauty Samstapakachar Vaishnav Ceremony Gora Priyajana Krishna Prema Bhakti Datta Patita Pavana His Divine Grace Abhochara Vinna Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ji Ki Jai Shri Gauriya Guru Varga Patita Udhar Ki Jai Shri Rupa Sanatana Bhatta Raghunatha Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Das Gunasat Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai नाम आचार्य शील हरिदास ठाकुर जी की जय जय अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसरि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय जय परम दयाल श्री नित्यानंद प्रभु की जय प्रेम नाम संकीर्तने का जनक प्रेम पुरुषोत्तम श्री सच्चिदानंद श्रीमान गौरंग श्री चैतन्य महाप्रभु गुरु हरि महावतार की जय गोल के प्रमधान हरि नाम संकीर्तन जग की जय जुग धर्म हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय बृहद निदांग ट्वेंस नैतुल बुक डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन सेव की जय शिशु राधा कृष्णा गोप राधा कुंद श्याम कुंद गिरिराज गोवर्धन की जय श्री ब्रजभूमि वृंदावन मथुरधाम की जय दलोशिव शिशु राधा नील माधव की जय श्री मायापुर नवद्वीप एक चक्रधाम की जय परम करुण श्री गौर निताय की जय श्री पुरुषोत्तम चित्र जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय श्री श्री जगन्नाथ स्वामी बलदेव प्रभु सुभद्रादेवी सुदर्शन चक्र भगवान की जय भक्ति सर्व विघ्न विनाशन कर सिंहरे भगवान की जय जगंगा माई जमुना माई की जय तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी भक्ति देवी की जय श्री मथुरा रानी की जय समवेत भक्त वृंद की जय निताय गौरी प्रमानंदे all glories to somebody bodies all glories to somebody bodies glories to somebody bodies all glories are glories glories to Shri Shri Guru Shri Gauranga Tai Guru
Namaste Narasimhaya
Namaste
Narasimhaya Namaste Narasimhaya
Namaste Narasimhaya
Prahlad Hlada Daine Hiranyakashi Purvakshaha
Hiranyakashi Purvakshaha
शीलाटङ्कानकालाये
शिलाटङ्कानकालाये
इतो नरसिंहा परतो नरसिंहो
इतो नरसिंहा परतो नरसिंहा
यतो यतो यामि ततो नरसिंहो
जतो जतो जामि ततो नरसिंहा
बाहिर नरसिंहो हृदये नरसिंहो
बाहिर नरसिंहा हृदये नरसिंहा
नरसिंहामदिं शरणं प्रपद्ये
नरसिंहमदिं शरणं प्रपद्ये
नरसिंहामदिं शरणं प्रपद्ये
नरसिंहमदिं शरणं प्रपद्ये
तव करकमलवरे नखाम् अद्भुतशृङ्गा दलिता हिरण्यकशिपो तानुभृङ्गा केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे
तव करकमलवरे नखाद्भुतसिंहा दलिता हिरण्यकशिपो तानुभृङ्गा केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे
जय नृसिंहदेव जय नृसिंहदेव नृसिंहदेव जय नृसिंहदेव
जय नृसिंहदेव जय नृसिंहदेव जय नृसिंहदेव जय नृसिंहदेव
जय भक्ता प्रह्लाद भक्त प्रह्लाद भक्त प्रह्लाद जय भक्त प्रह्लाद
जय
जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद
जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद
भक्ति विघ्न विनाशक श्री लक्ष्मी नृसिंहदेव भगवान की
जय
भक्त शिरोमणि श्री प्रहलाद
श्री वृंदायै तुलसी बाई प्रियै के शव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रादे देवी शर्तवताय नमो नमः वृंदायै तुलसी बाई प्रियै के शव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रादे देवी शर्तवताय नमो नमः वृंदायै तुलसी देव्याय प्रिय केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रदे देवी श्रुतवताय नमो नमः। श्रीमती तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी की जय। Going to sing? Yeah. Okay. Where's the mic? तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः।
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो।
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः।
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो अभिलाषी।
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 जे तुम्हारा शरण लो तारा वंच पूरा न हो।
जे तुम्हारा शरण ला तारा वंच पूर्णा।
कृपा कोरी कोरो तारे वृंदावन वासी।
तुम्हें कृपा कोरी कोरा तारे वृंदावन वासी।
मोराए अभिलाष विलास कुंज दियो वास।
मोराए अभिलाष विलास कुंज दियो वास।
नयने हरि बो सदा जुगल रूप राशि।
अमी नयने रिवो सदा जुगल रूप राशि।
निवेदन धारो साखीर अनुगाता कोरो।
निवेदन धारा सकीरयनु कथाकार।
सेवा अधिकारा दिए कोरो निज दासी।
सेवायाधिकार दिए करने जदासी।
दीना कृष्ण दासे कोए ये न मोरा होए।
दीना कृष्ण दास कोय ये न मोरा।
श्री राधा वासी
श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेम सदा नवासी
श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदा भासी
श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेम सदा नवासी
यानि कानि च पापानि भ्रमाहत्यधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रनाशन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रनाशन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्माहत्यधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रनाशन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रनाशन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्माहत्यधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रनाशन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रनाशन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे हरे
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare
जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी
जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी
जय वृंदा देवी जय वृंदा देवी जय वृंदा देवी जय वृंदा देवी
जय वृंदा देवी जय वृंदा देवी जय वृंदा देवी जय वृंदा देवी
नित्याय गौरा हरि बोल
हरि बोल
हरि बोल
हरि बोल
हरि बोल नित्याय गौरा हरि बोल
नित्याय गौरा हरि
बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल नित्याय गौरा हरि बोल। श्रीमती तुलसी महारानी वृंदा देवी की जय।
जय श्री वृंदाई तुलसी देवाई प्रिय केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रदे देवी शतवताय नमो नमः। वृंदायै तुलसी देवाई प्रिय केशव सत विष्णु भक्ति प्रदे देवी शतवताय नमो नमः। Brindayai Tulasi Devyai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradidevi Shatavatai Namaha. Jeshmati Tulasi Maharani Brinda Devi Ki Jai. O Tulasi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire to obtain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of you his wish is fulfilled. Bestow your mercy upon him, you make him resident of Vrindavana. Grant me a residence in pleasure groves of Shri Vrindavan Dham. Thus, within my vision, I will always behold the beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower carry the emissaries of Raj. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me your own maid servant. This very fallen Lord is servant Krishna praise. May I always swim in love with Shri Radha and Govind. Shri Mati Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shikyastakam Ki Jai. Chaito Darpana Marjanam Bhavamada Naivatanam Shri Akari Vachandrika Vitaranam Vidyavatu Jivanam Anandam Vivardhanam Pratipadam Purnamrita Shradanam Sarvatmasnam Parampara Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Vamudha Nija Sarva Shakti Tatra Pitani Smarlena Kala Vishati Shikava Vipaya Bhagavan Mamati Durhaiva Idrishamyajani Nanuraga Trinada Pisuni Chena Tarora Pisa Ishnuna Amani Namanadina Kirtanya Sadhari Nadhanam Najanam Nasundarim Kavitamba Jagarisha Maye Mama Janmani Janmanishari Bhavata Bhakti Chukirti Oinanda Tamjakim Karam Paritamam Visame Bhavam Buddhu Vaya Tavapada Pankaja Stitaduli Sadrisham Vichintaya Nayanam Galora Shrudharaya Vadanam Gadaghadarudaya Gira Pulakari Chitamba Pulukada Tabanamagrane Bhavisati Juga Itam Nimishena Chakrusha Prabhusha Itam Shunya Itam Jagata Sarvam Govinda Virahiname Asli Shava Padaratam Pinastumam Adarshnar Marmahatam Karotuva Jata Tathava Vidadhatulam Pato Mat Pranatastu Saivana Para Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Kristakam Ki Jai. Namo Mahavarannaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gaurati Shri Namaha. Glory to the Shri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart with the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan moment is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we're always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds and millions of names, like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you have invested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names, but I'm so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than strolling street, one should be more tolerant than the tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your casual devotional service, birth after birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Yes, some or other, I have fallen in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, or will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? Or will my voice choke up, and will the hairs of my body stand on the end of the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I'm feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna is my Lord, and it should remain so, even if he handles me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord unconditionally. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Kristakam Ki Jai. There are 10 offenses in matter of chanting the holy name of the Lord that should be avoided. They are as follows. 1, to blaspheme. The devotees who dedicate their life for propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2, to consider names of demigods, the Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, to be equal to or independent of the name Lord Vishnu. 3, to disobey the orders of the spiritual master. 4, to blaspheme the Vedic literatures or literatures and pursuits of Vedic version. 5, to consider the glory of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6, to give some interpretation to the holy name of the Lord. 7, to commit sinful activities and strength of chanting the holy name of the Lord. 8, to consider the chanting Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which are often viewed as a spiritual activity, karma kanda. 9, to instruct the faithless person by the glories of holy name. And 10, to not have complete faith in chanting the holy names and to maintain material attachments, even after understanding so many instructions in this matter. It also an offense to be irritated while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must carefully guard against 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success. Krishna Prema. Now let us offer our most humble obeisances unto all the Vaishnavas, devoted to the Lord. They are just like desired trees, they can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned soul. Jai.
Thakur ki jai. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhuta Srimati Bhakti Srimati. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gurumani Pacharine. Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskati Visatani. Shri Guru Pranama prayers ki jai. Om Aganyati Mirandasya Jnananjana. Hey, how are you? Haribol Prabhu. Nice to see you.
I just came for an office visit here.
Good. Haribol. Accept my obeisances. Oh, glories to Prabhupada. Hope everything is well. Good. Well, keep coming.
Yeah, sure. I'm actually going to office because I have a
Okay.
conference meeting, so that's why.
Haribol. Thank you for coming. Hare Krishna. Advaitam Sabhadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Visakha Nivitam Sa Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Satdeve Guruvani Pucharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Desatarine Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Iti Namine Shri Vasavanavi Devi Dayitaya Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Dayane Prabhave Namaha Madhur Ujvala Premadya Shri Rubhavanukha Bhaktita Shri Gora Karuna Shakti Gayat Namastate Namaste Kuravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Virudapa Apasidanta Dvantaharine Namo Gora Kishoraya Sakshad Vairagya Murtaye Vipralamba Rasambode Padam Bujayate Namaha Namo Guru Bhaktitananda Namine Guru Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Burayate Guru Vir Bhava Bhumestvam Nirdesta Sabjana Priya Vaishnava Sarvabhoma Sri Jaganatayate Namaha Vanchakalpa Turabhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Padayate Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namne Guru Chuse Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhaktarupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakam Namami Bhaktasaktikam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Jayatam Suratur Pangur Mama Manda Matirgati Matsarvasva Padombojo Radha Madana Mohano Divyad Vinduranya Kalpudramadaha Shimad Ratnagara Simhasanastito Shimad Radha Shila Govinda Devo Prestari Bihi Sevyamanusmarami Shiman Rasa Rasa Rambi Vamsivata Tatastita Karsan Venuswaner Gopir Gopinatak Striyestuna Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavanaswari Rishabhanustute Devi Pranamami Hare Priye Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Brahma Samhita Ki Jai Ishwara Parama Krishna Sachitananda Vigraha Anadi Radhi Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam Chintamani Prakara Sadma Sukalpa Vriksha Laksha Vritesa Surabhira Vipaliyantam Lakshmi Sahasra Satasambhrama Sevyamanam Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Venum Kanam Arvenda Dalayataksham Parhavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Kandarpa Koti Kamaniya Vishesha Sobham Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Alola Chandra Kala Sadvana Madhyavamsi Ratnam Gadam Pranay Keli Kalavilasam Shamam Tribanga Lalita Nita Prakasam Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Gangani Yasya Sakilendriya Vrittimanti Pasyanti Panti Kalyanti Chiram Jaganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadujvala Vigrahasya Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Advaitam Achutam Anadim Ananta Rupam Adyam Purana Purisham Navayovanam Cha Vede Sadurlabham Adurlabham Atma Bhakto Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastakoti Satasvatsara Samparamyo Vayo Ratapi Manasomuni Pungamanam Sopyasti Yat Papadasim Yavichintya Tatve Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ekopya Sora Chaitam Jagananda Kotim Yashakti Rasti Jagananda Chaya Yadanta Andantarasta Paramanu Chayantarastam Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yad Bhava Bhavita Diyo Manajasta Taiva Samprapya Rupa Mahima Sanayana Bhusa Suktarya Meva Nigama Pratitastavanti Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasat Patibhavita Abhis Tabirya Even Ichirupa Takalabi Goloka Even Ibsata Kilatma Bhuto Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena Santaksa Deva Hidesa Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Gunaswarupam Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ramadi Murti Sukalani Menatishtan Nanavataram Akarod Bhuvanesu Kintu Krishna Swayam Samabhavat Paramam Pamam Yo Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yasyaga Prabha Prabhavato Jagaranda Koti Koti Svasesa Vasudadi Vibhuti Bena Tad Brahma Niskalam Anantam Sesa Bhutam Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Maya Hiyasya Jagaranda Satani Sute Trigunya Tad Visaya Vida Vitaya Manam Sadva Valambi Parasatvam Visuddha Satvam Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasat Mataya Manasu Yaprani Nam Pratifulam Smaratam Upetya Lilaya Tena Bhuvanani Jaya Chasram Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Golo Kalamni Nijadamni Talechitasya Devi Maheswari Dhamma Sute 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 Te Prabhavani Chaya Vijasayena Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Shistista Te Pralaya Sadhava Sakti Reka Chayeva Yasya Bhuvanani Vibharti Durga Ichanu Rupam Abhyasya Chichesta Tesa Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Shiram Yata Dadi Vikara Vishesa Yoga Sanjayate Nahitata Pritakasti Hetu Yasambhutama Pitata Samapaiti Karyat Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Departure Hita Santaram Abhyupetya Dipayate Virita Hetu Samam Dharma Yastadri Geva Hitcha Vishnu Tayavibhati Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yakarna Narlava Jale Badisisma Yoga Nidramananta Jagaranda Saroma Kopa Adhada Saktim Avalambya Param Samurtim Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yasyaika Nisvasitikala Matavalambya Jivanti Loma Villaja Jagadanda Nata Vishnu Mahansa Yasya Kalabhisesu Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Basmanya Tasma Sakalesu Nijesu Teja Sriyam Kiyat Prakatayata Pitadvatatra Brahmaya Esa Jagadanda Vidanda Karta Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yat Pada Pala Vigam Vinidai Kumbha Dvande Pranama Samayesi Ganadi Raja Vignan Vinhanta Malamasi Jagatrayasya Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Agnir Mahiga Ganamambu Marudisascha Kalasta Tatma Manasiti Jagatrayani Yasmad Bhavanti Vibhavanti Visanti Yamcha Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yaschak Suresa Savitasa Kilagrahanam Raja Samasta Suramurti Resesa Teja Yasyagaya Brahmati Sambrita Kala Chakro Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Dharmo Tapapat Nichaya Sutayastapam Se Brahma Dikita Patagava Teyastajiva Yadata Matra Vibhava Prakatarpa Bhava Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yastin Rigopa Matavendra Mahosva Karma Bandhan Rupa Falabhajan Amatanoti Karmani Nirda Hatikinta Jabakti Bhajam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yam Krodha Kama Sahaja Pranayadi Vitti Vatsaya Moha Kurugora Vaste Bhavai Sanchintya Tasya Sarvisim Tanamapurete Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Shriya Kanta Kanta Parama Purusha Kalpataravo Jumabhumish Chintamani Ganama Ito Amritam Kata Ganam Natyam Kamanam Apibam Sipriya Saki Chiranandam Jyoti Parama Pitada Swadya Bapicha Sayatra Shiradi Bihisha Videsharabi Byasta Sumahan Nimesa Dakyava Vajitina Hiratripi Samaya Bajay Srita Dvipam Tamaham Ihil Kamitiam Vedantas Te Santakshi Te Vilachara Katipa Ye Shi Guru Astakapir Ki Jay. The spiritual master is receiving benediction from the ocean of mercy, just as a cloud pours water on the forest, right, to extinguish it. So the spiritual master delivers the materially afflicted world by extinguishing the blazing fire of material existence. From my respectful basis, at the lotus feet is such spiritual master who is an ocean of auspicious qualities, chanting the holy name, dancing in ecstasy, singing and playing musical instruments. The spiritual master is always gladdened by the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because he is relishing the mellows of pure devotion within his mind, sometimes his hair stands on end. He feels quivering in his body, and tears flow from his eyes like waves. From my respectful basis, at the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always engaged in the temple worship of Shri Radha and Krishna. He also engages his disciples in such worship. They dress the deities in beautiful clothes and ornaments, clean their temple, and perform other similar worship. But the Lord, I offer my respectful obeisance at the lotus feet of such spiritual master. Spiritual master is always offering Krishna 4 kinds of delicious food, analyzes that which is licked, chewed, drunk, and sucked. When the spiritual master sees that the devotees are satisfied by eating Bhagavad Prasada, he is satisfied. I offer my respectful obeisance at the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always eager to hear and chant about the conjugal loving affairs of Radha and Krishna and their qualities, names, and forms. The spiritual master aspires to relish these at every moment. I offer my respectful obeisance at the lotus feet of such spiritual master. The spiritual master is very dear because he is expert at assisting the gopis at different times, make different types of arrangements for the perfection of Radha and Krishna's conjugal loving affairs within the groves of Vrindavana. I offer my most humble obeisance unto the lotus feet of such spiritual master. The spiritual master is to be honored as much as the Supreme Lord because he is the most confidential servant to the Lord. This is acknowledged in all revealed scriptures and followed by all authorities. Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master who is a bona fide representative of Sri Hare Krishna. By the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna. Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement. Therefore, I should always remember and praise the spiritual master. At least 3 times a day, I should offer my respectful obeisance at the lotus feet of my spiritual master. His divine grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Srimad Bhagavatam Grantaraj Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 3, verse number 21. Imam lokam amum chaiva Ramayan sutaram yadun Reme shanadaya data Shanashri shanasorida. Imam, this lokam, earth, amam, and the other worlds, cha, also, eva, certainly, Ramayan, pleasing, sutaram, specifically, yadun, the yadus, reme, enjoyed, shanadaya, by night, data, given by shana, leisure, stri, with women, shana, conjugal love, sorida, friendship, Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. The Lord enjoyed in this world with His pure devotees. Although He is the personality of Godhead and is transcendental to all material attachment, He nevertheless exhibited much attachment for His pure devotees on the earth, as well as for the demigods who engage in His service in the heavenly planets as powerful. Sorry. Well, I read it, yeah. Okay, anyway. The Lord enjoyed His pastimes, both in this world and in other worlds, higher planets, specifically in the association of the Yadu dynasty, as leisure hours offered by night. He enjoyed the friendship of conjugal love with women. The Lord enjoyed in this world with His pure devotees, although He is the personality of Godhead and is transcendental to all material attachment. He nevertheless exhibited much attachment for His pure devotees on the earth, as well as for the demigods who engage in His service in the heavenly planets as powerful delegated directors in the management of all material activities. He displayed special attachment for His family members, the Yadus, as well as for His 16,000 wives, who had the opportunity to meet Him in the leisure hours of night. All these attachments of the Lord are manifestations of His internal potency, of which the external potency is only a shadow representation. In the Skanda Purana, Prabhasa Kanda, in the topics between Lord Shiva and Gauri, there is confirmation of His internal potential manifestations. There is mention of the Lord's meeting with 16,000 cowherd damsels, although He is the Hamsa, transcendental, supersoul, and maintainer of all living entities. The 16,000 cowherd damsels are a display of 16 varieties of internal potencies. This will be more elaborately explained in the 10th canto. It is said there that Lord Krishna is just like the moon, and the internal potential damsels are like the stars around the moon. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The Lord enjoyed His pastimes both in this world and in other worlds, higher planets, specifically in the association of the Yadu dynasty. At leisure hours offered by night, He enjoyed the friendship of conjugal love with women. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So this is a challenge to all the atheists to understand Krishna. They think that the highest pleasure in the world is mundane sex life. But yet, the Lord's pastimes far depass or far outwit anything the atheists can imagine. And when they hear these type of things, they become bewildered, and they say, I can't believe that because I can't do that. Therefore, how can He do that? And that's based on envy. And this is the dilemma for the atheists and the demons. They will categorically reject anything that seems to outpass or seems to outdo their abilities. But yet, the devotees understand these things because they're not envious of Krishna. This enviousness of Krishna is the reason why we're in the material world. That's the original reason why we fell down from the spiritual world. Every one of us who are in the material world are errant. We made this fundamental decision to walk away from Krishna, thinking that we can emulate Him. And actually, that is what we're trying to do in the material world. We're trying to control some part of the material nature as if we are the supreme dominator and controller. But actually, we become more entangled by the material nature the more we try and do that. So this is a great challenge for anyone to understand because we all originally became envious of the Lord. Now, why would we do that? Well, because of the desire to, let's say, emulate Him, to be equal to Him or greater than Him. So this happens all the time, that people always try to emulate others or be greater than them to prove their supremacy. So the greater attitude is to be submissive to the Lord, and that way we free ourselves from that enviousness. And this is explained in more detail in the Bhagavad Gita, also in the 12th chapter, the 13th and 14th verses. So it says there, Advaita sarvabhutana maitrakaruna evacha nirmamo nirhankara samadukha sukha shami santustas tam yogi yatatma drita nischaya maya pratamano buddhir yomad bhakta same priya. This is 12th chapter, 13th and 14th verse, where it says, one who is not envious, but is a kind friend to all living entities, who does not think himself a proprietor and is free from false ego, who is equal in both happiness and distress, who is tolerant, always satisfied, self-controlled, and engaged in devotional service with determination, his mind and intelligence fixed on me. Such a devotee of mine is very dear to me. This is an extremely important 2 verses. These are extremely important 2 verses. And you notice, right in the beginning it says, Advaita, one who is not envious. This is the reason why we are in the material world, because we became envious of Krishna. And also, if we become envious of Krishna, we become envious of ourselves. How do we know that? We deny ourselves the possibility of becoming Krishna conscious. And we've done that already for many, many lifetimes. So to overcome that enviousness of Krishna, and it extends to other people. If we become envious of Krishna, we become envious of others also. And there is competition to prove who is the greater person. This type of attitude is definitely due to ignorance. And therefore, one time in Vrindavan, some people came and they wanted to argue about who's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And they wanted to try and argue that with Jiva Goswami. Well, in that discussion, Jiva Goswami, of course, is the greatest philosopher that's ever existed, in a sense. So, at one point, he decimated them in the discussion. And after that, the other Goswamis, Sanatana and Rupa Goswami, they, in a sense, told Jiva Goswami he shouldn't do that, because being able to convince other people that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that's what we're trying to do all the time. But to do it in a very aggressive way is not a good thing, because then it turns people away. So, therefore, they sort of didn't chastise him, but they brought this to his attention. So here we see that to be able to convince people that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of the Godhead, we should convince them by our behavior. So there's 2 ways of preaching. One is by words, and the other is by actions. And the actions of being humble. So the beginning of knowledge is called amanitvam, being very humble. This is not taught in schools. They think that, if you have a lot of knowledge and you can defeat others in arguments, you're very intelligent. But actually, that doesn't really convince people. It just gets people angry, oftentimes. But to be able to convince people by your example is much more powerful and much more meaningful for others also, because they become naturally humble in the association of people who are also humble, right? So, therefore it says here, coming again in the purport, coming again to the point of pure devotional service, the Lord is describing the transcendental qualifications of a pure devotee in these 2 verses. A pure devotee is never disturbed in any circumstances, nor is he envious of anyone. See, if you're not envious of Krishna, you're not going to be envious of anyone, because everyone is part and parcel of Krishna. But if you become envious of Krishna, not only you become envious of yourself, but you become envious of others also. And that puts a person in a constant difficulty and dilemma. And it says, nor does a devotee become his enemies, nor is he envious of anyone, nor does a devotee become his enemy's enemy. He thinks This person is acting as my enemy due to my own past misdeeds. So it is better to suffer than to protest. That this is a point that no materialist would ever accept. It's better to suffer than to protest. They said, no, I'm going to protest. I'm going to get in an argument with this person. I'm going to beat this person up. Just like Joe Biden said, I'm going to punch Trump in the nose. This is why people get into trouble, because they become belligerent if they don't win an argument. And they want to prove their superiority over others. So it is better to suffer than to protest. No one would accept, no materialist would accept that. They would say, what? I'm going to fight. I'm going to start a war if necessary. So in the Srimad Bhagavatam 10.14.8, it is stated, Tate nukampam susamik samano jana evatma kritam vipakam. Whenever a devotee is in distress or has fallen into difficulty, he thinks that it is the Lord's mercy upon him. He thinks, thanks to my past misdeeds, I should suffer far, far greater than I am suffering now. So it is by the mercy of the Supreme Lord that I am not getting all the punishment I am due. I am just getting a little by the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is a real devotee. And it's important that we understand this verse. Otherwise, easily we can go down the slippery slope of becoming belligerent and angry, especially if we don't win a contest. So oftentimes, what happened in Vrindavan was that sometimes people would come and try and argue with the 6 Goswamis. And sometimes the Goswamis would say, well, you win the argument. If you want, I'll sign a paper saying you win the argument. So winning an argument is not actually the goal. What the goal is, that showing an example of humility and self-control and love for Krishna, that is much more meaningful than winning an argument. So should we not get into discussions with people and just acquiesce? Not that either. But when a person criticizes or blasphemes Krishna, we have to speak up. On the other hand, when someone is very argumentative, it's better to avoid arguing with that person, because it's not going to give a good result. But it's a hard thing for people to understand, because sometimes you get your anger aroused, and you insist on arguing. So here it says, so it is by the mercy of the Supreme Lord that I am not getting all the punishment I am due. I am just getting little by the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the devotee is always calm, quiet, and patient despite many distressful conditions. A devotee is also always kind to everyone, even to his enemy. Nirmama means that a devotee does not attach much importance to the pains and trouble pertaining to the body, because he knows perfectly well that he is not the material body. He does not identify with the body. Therefore, he is freed from the conception of false ego and is equipoised in happiness and distress. He is tolerant, and he is satisfied with whatever comes by the grace of the Supreme Lord. He does not endeavor much to achieve something with great difficulty. Therefore, he is always joyful. He is completely perfect, mystic, because he is fixed in the instructions received from the spiritual master, and because his senses are controlled, he is determined. He is not swayed by false arguments, because no one can lead him from the fixed determination of devotional service. He is fully conscious that Krishna is the eternal Lord, so no one can disturb him. All these qualifications enable him to fix his mind and intelligence entirely on the Supreme Lord. Such a standard of devotional service is undoubtedly very rare, but a devotee becomes situated in that stage by following the regulative principles of devotional service. Furthermore, the Lord says that such a devotee is very dear to him. for the Lord is always pleased with all his activities in Krishna consciousness. So, this is a very high level of devotional service. And to be able to attain such a state, it can only happen when we strictly follow the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness and constantly remind ourselves of what is our mandate as a devotee. Our mandate as a devotee is to always show, as much as possible, the highest level of Krishna consciousness. So we do not become our enemy's enemy. We are not disturbed by, let's say, personal defeat in an argument, or in a discussion. Because sometimes you will meet people who can quote Shastra better than we can, although they might be Mayavadis. Therefore, sometimes we might get what's called flummoxed, confused by the fact that they are able to quote things that we should be able to do, but we're not. So we should not be disturbed by such things. And it's better to just walk away from such types of arguments. On the other hand, when we become more advanced, we're able to make such cogent statements based on Shastra that other people realize that they're defeated in an argument. But there are people who, even if they're defeated in an argument, refuse to accept it. That was like Rukmi and others. They would argue with Krishna and could be defeated, and they would claim that they won the argument. So, therefore, it's useless to discuss with such people. So you can when you see that a person is adamant like that, you just walk away from them, politely. So it says here, nor does a devotee become his enemy's enemy. So a devotee is never disturbed in any circumstances, nor is he envious of anyone, nor does a devotee become his enemy's enemy. So, and ultimately it's better to suffer than to protest. So this is what we should aim for in life, teaching by example. And Prabhupada says, example is better than precept. What does that mean? Look that word up, precept, P-R-E-C-E-P-T. Example is better than precept. It means basically, it's better to give a good example than to simply continue an argument. And that will just go ad infinitum without any end. What's it say, precept?
It says a general rule intended to regulate behavior or thought.
Okay. So a general rule. So the general rule should be, it's better to suffer than to protest, rather than it's better to continue arguing without end. So we have to be able to recognize people. Some people like to argue. They like to get into disputes, and they want to win. So the one who wins is the one who's Krishna conscious, not the one who can defeat someone else in an argument. So also, in the 16th chapter is a very interesting verse. Let's see where that is. 16th chapter. One second. Chapter, verse number 18. It says, Ahankaram balam darpam, kamam krudam chasamsrita, mam atma para dehesu, pradrisanto vyasuyakaha, bewildered by false ego, strength, pride, lust, and anger, the demons become envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is situated in their own bodies and in the bodies of others, and blaspheme against the real religion. So now, if you put these two verses together, you're going to see that this is very, very high quality knowledge that Prabhupada is giving us. And in the purport he says, a demoniac person, being always against God's supremacy, does not like to believe in the scriptures. He is envious of both the scriptures and the existence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is caused by his so-called prestige and his accumulation of wealth and strength. He does not know that the present life is a preparation for the next life. Not knowing this, he is actually envious of his own self as well as of others. Wow, that's a huge statement. That when we become envious of Krishna, because we are part and parcel of Krishna, we also become envious of ourselves. And the proof is that we'll deny ourselves the possibility to become Krishna conscious. Not knowing this, he is actually envious of his own self as well as of others. He commits violence on other bodies and on his own. He does not care for the supreme control of the personality of Godhead because he has no knowledge. Being envious of the scriptures and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he puts forward false arguments against the existence of God and denies the scriptural authority. He thinks himself independent and powerful in every action. He thinks that since no one can equal him in strength, power, or wealth, he can act in any way and no one can stop him. If he has an enemy who might check the advancement of his sensual activities, he makes plans to cut him down by his own power. So that's a very dangerous person, and getting into an argument with such a person is a waste of time because it won't result in anything good. And so there are sometimes people who win a battle by acquiescing. That's a good word, acquiesce. A-Q-U-I-S. Anyway, you can look it up. It means surrendering. How do you win a battle by surrendering? It's a very interesting point. There was once a king in Armenia, and he was very, very successful. He had conquered many other people, and he had a very, very opulent city. And there was a lot of culture and wonderful things going on. And then the Romans attacked him several times, but the last time that they attacked, his son went on the Roman side and was fighting against his own father. And it looked like the Romans were going to win by destroying his capital city and killing a lot of people and making them slaves. So what did he do? He got on a horse and rode out of his capital city that was besieged by the Romans and surrendered himself to the commander of the Roman army, bowed down to him. And the commander of the Roman army was very impressed by this, and he said, "Why did you do this?" Basically, he's willing to die. He said, "Well, I rather want to die myself than to see this beautiful city destroyed and the people put into slavery." And the Roman commander was very impressed, and his own son, told the Roman commander, "Don't believe what he says. He's a phony. He should kill him right away." This is how mean sometimes people become, even members of one's own family, right? But the commander put the son into jail, appreciated what the man did, and he said, "If you're willing to pay taxes to Rome, you can go back and manage your city, and but we will take over the control of everything. But you can continue, and we won't destroy your capital, and we won't take any prisoners." And he didn't expect that, right? He thought they were going to kill him, and who knows what else they would have done. But they were so impressed by his humility and his, let's say, purity of purpose that they did not destroy the city and did not take captives. but they arrested the son. So that's a very interesting story, right? And it actually happened in history. So sometimes it's a stronger thing to surrender than to fight. You know, sometimes, right? It's not that every case is going to be like that. But when a person sees the purity of another person, even though they're a bad person, they can be shocked by it and impressed by it. Right? Anyway, it says here that it's better to suffer than to protest. So Prabhupada has also said, if you can avoid an argument, do it at any price. In other words, it's better to avoid an argument than to get into an argument, because it only creates bad feelings, whether you win or you lose. Now, how do we know when to avoid an argument? Well, you have to be able to recognize the qualities of people. Even if they lose in an argument, they will insist that they won. And then they will engage in what's called ad hominem attacks. Okay, first of all, did you see that word?
Yes.
What's it mean?
So it says accepting something reluctantly, but without protest.
Okay, what's the word again? It is
Acquiesce.
acquiesce. Yes,
Yeah.
acquiesce, not acquiesce. Acquiesce. Yeah, yeah. To accept defeat in an argument, right?
Yeah, to accept something even though they're reluctant, but they don't protest.
Right. So it doesn't mean you agree with the other person, but you just avoid the argument, right? So Prabhupada said, if you can avoid an argument, do it at any price, right? So, but sometimes you can't avoid. Like the Pandavas, they did everything possible, and with Krishna's help, to avoid the battle, etc. But the other side just would not stop their impossible position. Their impossible position was they're not going to. Duryodhana told Krishna, "I won't even give the Pandavas enough room to put a pin." So they were completely adamant. So Krishna begged them. He said, "Look, all they want, just they're Kshatriyas. They have to have something. So just give them one village apiece, and they'll be satisfied. You can manage the whole kingdom. They're not going to get into a fight with you." He said, "No, I won't give them enough room to even put a pin into." So that means, he's crazy, right? He's a complete madman. So then they had to fight. So sometimes you're forced into a situation like that. Okay, so, but if you can avoid the argument, why? Therefore, the devotee is always calm, quiet, and patient despite many distressful conditions. A devotee is also always kind to everyone, even to his enemy. Nirmama means that a devotee does not attach much importance to the pains and trouble pertaining to the body, because he knows perfectly well that he is not the material body. Now that's an important point. Like, for example, if you have a toothache, can you point to it? Well, if you have a toothache, can you point to it?
Yeah.
Okay. If someone insults you, can you point to where it hurts? You're going to say it hurts, right? But where can you point to where it hurts? If you point, well, it's right here. But then the doctor puts a stethoscope on your heart, and he says, nothing wrong with your heart. So what actually is hurt when you've been insulted and you say, that hurts, and you're crying or you're upset? What actually hurts? It's the false ego. It's something false. It's not really you. In the same way it says here, nirmama means that a devotee does not attach much importance to the pains and trouble pertaining to the body, because he knows perfectly well that he is not the material body. He does not identify with the body. Therefore, he is freed from the conception of false ego. So the whole genesis, that's another good word, genesis. The genesis of the false ego is identifying with the body. And this is what a child learns in the family. they learn that you're part of this family, and we have a very illustrious history, and this thing and that thing. You are Talangana. You are not Andhra. It's, all this bodily identification, right? And people are willing to fight over it and kill each other. Right? But the devotee understands that he is not the material body. He does not identify with the body. Therefore, he is freed from the conception of false ego and is equipoised. Equipoised is another good word. Okay, what does that other word mean? Genesis, yeah.
Genesis is the origin.
It means birth.
Yeah, the beginning of the formation of something.
Right. So the beginning of the false ego is identifying with the body. And if you continue throughout life doing that, well, you're always going to get into fights with people and develop a false sense of superiority. Like one time I was talking with my great auntie, great because she was my mother's sister, right? So she was a very pious person. And one day we were talking, and I said to her, Jesus was born a Jew. And she said, no, that's not possible. I said, really? Then what was he born into? He has to be Armenian. He cannot be a Jew. So I didn't argue with her, right? I didn't want to, I think she was like, 70-some years old at that time. So I didn't want to, shake her up, But so this is bodily identification, right? Well, who cares if he's a Jew or not a Jew, right? But she said, no, he's Armenian. He's not a Jew. So I didn't want to. So sometimes you see these things, and what do, right? Are you going to argue with the person, or you just leave it alone and avoid the argument? So he does not identify with the body, therefore he is freed from the conception of false ego and is equipoised in happiness and distress. He is tolerant, and he is satisfied with whatever comes by the grace of the Supreme Lord. He does not endeavor much to achieve something with great difficulty, therefore he is always joyful. Anyway, I try and read this verse almost every day just to remind myself, because it's so important. This high quality information. And then 16th chapter, verse number 18. I don't want to become envious of myself, because we're part and parcel of Krishna. If we become envious of Krishna, we'll become envious of ourselves, and then we'll, because of false ego, we'll deny ourselves the possibility to be Krishna conscious. So Krishna consciousness is all about Saranagati. Now, what is Saranagati? Well, it means surrendering unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is explained more deeply in the 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where it says, and by the way, this verse today is talking about Krishna's conjugal loving affairs, right? So why am I talking about Saranagati? Because you cannot understand Krishna's conjugal loving affairs while still maintaining false ego, because you'll become envious of Krishna. So it's absolutely important that we understand what is Saranagati. So it says, 18th chapter, 66th verse in the purport, the process of surrender to Krishna is described in Hari Bhakti Vilasa 11.676. Anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjanam raksisya titi vishvaso goptrite varanam tata atma nikshepa karpanye sadvida saranagati. So these are the 6 steps, or the 6, let's say, components of surrender to the Lord. According to the devotional process, one should simply accept such religious principles that will lead ultimately to the devotional service of the Lord. One may perform a particular occupational duty according to his position in the social order, but if by executing his duty one does not come to the point of Krishna consciousness, all his activities are in vain. So when it says anukulyasya sankalpa, That means that you do everything that is positive for pleasing the Lord. Right? So that means that you accept all the religious principles of Krishna consciousness that will lead ultimately to devotional service. So devotional service is you're only doing things that are favorable to Krishna consciousness. So that's the first point. Anukulyasya sankalpa, pratikulyasya varjanam. But if by executing his duty one does not come to the point of Krishna consciousness, all his activities are in vain. Anything that does not lead to the perfectional stage of Krishna consciousness should be avoided. So the second point, pratikulyasya varjanam, give up everything that's not favorable to Krishna consciousness. So do everything that is favorable to Krishna consciousness. Give up everything that's not favorable to Krishna consciousness. So sometimes people cannot see what is not favorable for Krishna consciousness. That's why there are gurus, Sikhs and Diksha gurus, that one should, when you're not sure if the action you're going to take is favorable to Krishna consciousness or not favorable, you should ask bona fide authorities. Let them tell you if it's favorable or not favorable, because you can't figure it out. Just like one time there was a devotee in our congregation who said to me, Prabhu, I lost my job and I'm not finding a job here. I might have to move away and go somewhere else. I said, don't do it. He said, what? What do you mean don't do it? I mean, I can't stay without a job. I said, wait a minute. First of all, are you happy being near the temple? He said, yeah. I mean, I purposely moved near the temple so I could participate in all the activities. And I said, are you coming regularly to the temple? He said, yeah, of course I am. Why are you asking that? No, I just want to know that you're happy with the temple and you're making spiritual advancement. He said, yeah, I've advanced tremendously by Krishna's mercy and the devotee's mercy. I said, therefore, don't try and find a job somewhere else. He said, I don't understand what you're saying. I said, if you see, everything depends on the purity of your desire. If you purely desire to stay near the temple in order to continue advancing in spiritual consciousness, rather than getting a job, let's say in Alabama, where there's no temple, I said, you're not going to, you purposely want to stay near the temple, and this particular temple, because you've made spiritual advancement. So therefore, Krishna will help you. I said, you have to have that faith. He said, well, but in my branch of expertise, there's not many jobs in this area. I said, don't worry about that. I said, just have faith, and Krishna will help you so you can stay near the temple. He said, okay. So 2 months later, he found a very good job, and he's still here, right? It didn't happen overnight, right? But I said, just maintain your faith, even though it's, it looks like it's impossible. But because of the purity of your desire, Krishna will help you. So everything depends on the motive. If our motive is to purely serve the Lord, He's definitely going to help you, even in impossible situations. Right? What looks impossible is not necessarily impossible. So this is the process of surrender. You have to actually have faith in Krishna. So, and the first 2 points is accept everything favorable for Krishna consciousness and reject everything that's not favorable. And number 3, rakshishyaititi vishwaso, always be convinced that Krishna will protect you in every situation. See? Even in the most difficult and, let's say, impossible situations. Right? You have to have the faith that Krishna will protect you. Rakshishyaititi vishwaso. And then goptrute varanam tata, is that one may perform a particular occupational duty. One does not occupational duty according to his position as social order, but if by executing his duty one does not come to the point of Krishna consciousness, all his activities are in vain. Anything that does not lead to the perfectional stage of Krishna consciousness should be avoided. Okay, so that's the second point. Third point, one should be confident that in all circumstances, Krishna will protect him from all difficulties. There it is. That's Raik Sisyatiti Vishwaso. He'll protect the devotee in all circumstances. And then it says, there is no need of thinking how one should keep the body and soul together. Krishna will see to that. Now, this is the hardest point. People say, well, man, I'm not going to find a job here. There are no jobs in my particular expertise. And I don't know why Harivilas is saying this, because it's just going to lead to a disaster. Well, not necessarily, because Krishna can perform miracles. Like, for example, Arjuna took a vow that if he does not kill, I'll tell you who it is in a minute. I forgot his name, but I'll remember it. Jayadraj, Jayadraj. If he doesn't kill him before the end of the battle time, because everybody followed rules at that time, so they would only fight during the day. They wouldn't fight at night, right? Nowadays, they can't wait till night to attack the enemy, right? But previously there were rules and regulations that they followed somewhat, So nighttime comes, and he wasn't able to kill Jayadraj. So he became very forlorn and very, very defeated. And Krishna said, what's the matter? He said, well, I made this vow that I would commit suicide if I didn't kill him. He said, don't worry. He said, get your bow and arrow ready. He said, but it's nighttime. He said, just get your bow and arrow ready. So he gets his bow and arrow ready, right? And all of a sudden, the sun comes back up, and he kills Jayadraj, and then the sun goes away. So that's a miracle, right? But Krishna can do anything, right? He's a supreme controller. So you have to have this faith, even in the most dire, impossible situations, that somehow or other, in some mysterious way, Krishna will help, right? And then it says, there is no need of thinking how one should keep the body and soul together. Krishna will see to that. One should always think himself helpless and should consider Krishna the only basis for his progress in life. Now, this is even harder than the previous point. Always think oneself helpless. So one time I asked Prabhupada, I said, Prabhupada, how can we be humble? And he said, well, when you're convinced that there's nothing, absolutely nothing in this material world that will save you except the mercy of Krishna, then you will become genuinely humble. Right? So that means you have to be very patient. That means even in the worst situations, you have to be patient and continue following the regulative principles strictly and chanting rounds without, getting scared or intimidated, and remain, with only pure desires, not vengeance. Just like I know a person who was involved in getting a divorce, but that person did not start the divorce. The other person started the divorce, and then, but this person thought that they could outsmart the other, the other person, and did certain things that were not proper to do in such a situation, such as leave the country, run away, blah, blah, blah. And then, because they were attached to keeping their job in the United States, they came back again. And I kept telling this person, I said, look, don't leave, but they left. Now, after they left, went back to India, they said that they were going to come back again. I said, don't come back. I said, if you come back, you're going to have to go through a very expensive and very challenging, situation. They didn't listen to me. They came back. Then exactly what I said happened, and eventually they were completely defeated and completely lost everything. Right. So every time I gave advice, they didn't listen to me, and they just did the opposite. So that's not good, right? Because sometimes, because why? Ultimately, by making mistakes, people will just make a situation worse and worse, right? So it's better not to leave and just face the challenge and just depend on Krishna. But if you leave and then you come back again, then you're definitely going to be in big trouble. Right? Okay, so Krishna will see to that. One should always think himself helpless and should consider Krishna the only basis for his progress. So that is Gopchitre Varanam Tata. As soon as one seriously engages himself in devotional service to the Lord in full Krishna consciousness, at once he becomes freed from all contamination of material nature. There are different processes of religion and purificatory processes by cultivation of knowledge, meditation in the mystic yoga system, etc. But one who surrenders unto Krishna does not have to execute so many methods. That simple surrender unto Krishna will save him or her from unnecessarily wasting time. One can thus make all progress at once and be freed from all sinful reactions. So, this is a very important. So the last two things is always remain humble and meek in situations. Not become an antagonist, a serious antagonist, and just go on fighting all the time. Okay, so if we surrender unto Krishna, then you can understand Krishna's conjugal loving affairs. If we still have the false ego, then you'll never understand anything. So we'll speak more deeply about Krishna and his conjugal loving affairs tomorrow. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Are there any questions?
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. So I think there's one dilemma, I guess, some people will have in terms of complete surrender and then the planning that still needs to happen, because
The
planning to do an activity, an endeavor still needs to happen, and we cannot just take the surrender as purely a way to say, oh, I won't do anything and Krishna will take care. I mean, can you help elaborate in terms of where the human endeavor should still be put in place and where the faith in the Lord's mercy should be?
Well, for example, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, he was living with his family. He had brothers who were very wealthy. And one time, the brothers insulted a devotee of Balaram. And it was indicative of the fact that they were envious of Balaram. They believed in Krishna, but not in Balaram, who's not different than Krishna, right? So you can't, that's an untenable situation. And because of that, they insulted, seriously, a disciple of Balaram. So this really put Krishnadas Kaviraj in a dilemma, because it's his own brothers that did this. Although his brothers organized a Sankirtan program in their home. And this one disciple of Balaram came, and the pujari basically insulted him. And then the disciple of Balaram realized that he was being insulted not because of him, but because he's the disciple of Balaram, and this person was actually envious of Balaram. And the whole family was, except for Krishnadas Kaviraj. So that night he had a dream, and Balaram appeared before him in the dream and said, "Go immediately to Vrindavan." So when he woke up, he was trying to think, is this real or is it not real, right? Because it was during a dream that he saw this. But it was so real, he realized that Balaram was directly speaking to him. So he left his family, left everything, and went to Vrindavan. And eventually he wrote the Chaitanya Charitamrita by getting the mercy of the Goswamis in Vrindavan. So there are situations, there's one example of it, where you walk away. Just give everything up and walk away, take complete shelter of Krishna consciousness. So there are, just like that king, right? The king he realizes, like, if he continues fighting, it could mean the destruction of his whole city and all the people that living there. It would be disastrous. So he was willing to give himself up and let them kill him, and but not destroy the city. But they're going to take over everything, and that really impressed the commander to have the courage to do that. Just like what would happen if Zelensky, gets on a horse and goes into Donetsk and that other place, and say, I surrender. You can do whatever you want with me. Just leave everybody alone. I mean, you take over. That's okay, but just don't destroy things anymore, right? That would be amazing, wouldn't it? He would become historically significant, right? But no, he's not going to do that, because the Crazy Joe is sending him more and more weapons so that they can, kill more and more people, So you see, sometimes you have to, say, okay, I give up, or I'm leaving. I'm going to walk away from this whole situation. So it's difficult to. It depends what the stakes are. Steak is not something you eat. S-T-A-K-E-S, rather than S-T-E-A-K. So it depends what the stakes are. It could be like in the case of that king. He preferred dying himself than to see everything destroyed. Or Krishnadas Kaviraj, he got a direct order, although it appeared in a dream, to leave his family and leave everything and go to Vrindavan and just take Krishna consciousness completely. So these are difficult questions, and we should get the help of bona fide Sikhen Diksha gurus before we make a decision that might be our undoing completely, or because what is the actual goal of life? The actual goal of life is to become Krishna conscious, right? It's not to win arguments all the time. So we have to be very careful about how we make our decisions. Anyway, that's the level. That's as much as I can answer right now. There might be more information later on as we continue reading Bhagavatam. Hare Krishna.
Hopefully it's short. So Hare Krishna Maharaj, we discuss about, like Prabhupada saying in purport that better to be surrender. Sorry.
It's better to sing than to protest. It's better to be humble than to protest.
To protest. So in case of Pandavas also, I think that is called protest, right? I mean, they fought back against Kauravas.
No. For a long time, they acquiesced. They followed what Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra told them to do. Right?
Yeah, when at some point
when they lost their wife and she was being stripped, they didn't do anything. They just sat there, right? Or they didn't want to just sit there, but Yudhisthira said, don't do anything. Bhima got upset, but he still followed what Yudhisthira said. And then they were given a palace of lac that was a whole trick by Duryodhana to kill them, set the place on fire. They accepted that. They had to go into incognito for a whole year. They had to go away for 13 years. They accepted all those things. They didn't protest. It's better to suffer than to protest.
Yeah, better to suffer than protest.
It's only when Krishna went and said to Duryodhana, he said, and Dhritarashtra said, look, they're willing to give you the whole kingdom. They're not going to get their due rights here. But but just give them one village each, and they'll be satisfied, and there won't be any fighting, and there won't, They said no, we won't even give them a pin's worth of land.
Yeah. So in fact, even
so after going through all that suffering, when Krishna himself tried to settle the affair, and they said no to Krishna, that's when Krishna said, now we're going to fight.
Yeah, exactly. So even Arjuna was not ready to fight. That means it's kind of one type of suffering. He thought better to suffer rather than fighting. But Krishna wants him to fight, right?
Yeah.
So Krishna want. So this sentence, like some of them, like not applicable. It's not a golden rule that it's 100%. So some it's based on situation, time, place, circumstances that this might change.
No, but see, Krishna made the decision. Arjuna didn't make the decision.
Right, right.
So you have to be careful. You're not supposed
But
to
not
make the
everybody is so
decision.
fortunate,
You're not
Maharaj,
supposed
so
to
that
make the decision. You have to get that decision from a higher authority, spiritual authority.
Mm-hmm.
If you leave it up to yourself, it's just like this person. Every time I told this person, don't do this, they did the exact opposite. And not only one time, 2 or 3 times, the person kept doing the exact opposite after I specifically told them, don't do it. So eventually, you know, they caused their own complete defeat because they wouldn't take good advice. So how many times Vibhishan tried to convince Ravana, just give Sita back to Ram, and you know Ram will forgive you and everything will be all right. He didn't listen. So the order to go and fight has to come from a higher authority. You cannot make that decision. You can try to make it if you want, but it's better to get it from a higher authority. Okay?
Yeah.
Haribol. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Guru Charana Kevala Bhakati Sadma
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma
Bandho Moi Savadana Mate
Bandho Mui Savadana Mate
Jahara Prasade Bai E Bhava Toriya Jai
Janara Prasade Bai E Bhavatoriya Jai
Krishna Prapti Hoy Jaha Hoy Te
Krishna Prapti Hoya Hoyte
Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitite Koriya Kya
Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitete Koriya Kya
Arana Kori Ho Mane Asha
Arana Koriya Mane Asa
Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Utama Gati
Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Ukamagati
Jai Prasade Pure Sarva Asha
Prasade Pure Sarva Asa
चक्षुदान दिलो जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
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 दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो
दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय prakasita.
Prema bhakti jaha hoite avidya vinasha jate.
Prema bhakti jaha hoite avidya vinasha jate.
Vede gai jahara charito.
Vede gai janara charito.
Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adama Janara Bandhu.
Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adana Janara Bandhu.
Lokinath Lokera Jivana.
Lokinath Lokera Jivana.
Ha ha Prabhu Koro Doya Deho More Pada Chaya.
Ah Prabhu Kora Doya Deya Mori Pada Chaya.
Ibijas Goshik Tribhuvana.
Ebeyas Gusakti Bhuvana.
Srila Prabhupada Patita Pavana.
Prabhupada Patita Pavana.
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada.
Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine.
Namaha Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine.
Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine.
Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desatarine.
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva.
Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva.
Nitya Gara Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parajagachasta Tarasatarishi Shishimad. His Divine Grace. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Sikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vinda Ki Jai. Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Samkunda Radha Kunda. Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Shri Manipur Dham Ki Jai, Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Tulasi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Ganga Maya Ki Jai, Jamuna Maya Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhaktavinda Ki Jai, Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, Patita Pavana Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutali Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Tinamani. Namaste Saraswati Devi Guruvani Pracharani Nirvisesa Sudhivari Paskatya Desatari. The lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain pure devotional service. I bow to his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From him, ecstatic prema emanates. By him, ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, and the Lord and master of devotees. O Master, be merciful unto us. Give us the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread through all the three worlds. You take shelter of your lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Go to Premanandi. Hari Bol. Namaste. Go ahead. Go ahead. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Krishna. Hare Krishna.